You know, they say there's always something perhaps a little positive, some silver lining. And obviously, it's a tragedy for America and it's a tragedy for democracy. But the one silver lining is that the big fear, and it was a very realistic fear, is that Trump out of the White House would be perhaps even more dangerous than Trump in the White House. With social media, with hundreds of millions of dollars behind him, the general view was that Trump would be the power behind the throne. He would run the Republican Party. He might run again for president, but certainly he would be a malevolent influence that would, in many ways, cripple Biden and his administration. I think what we've really seen is that the Trump balloon is basically imploding, and that the one silver lining is that I think the Trump legacy will now be the president who led the country to disaster and led his own political party, the grand old party, to disaster.
Interesting issues that you raised there. How do you see Donald Trump dealing with the situation? Now, obviously, a little bit of confusion. In fact, an about turn. 2 days ago, he was urging his supporters to storm Capitol Hill. Now, a video released, an about turn.
You know, the secret of Trump is that I think for normal people, he is a very transparent person. He is a weak leader. He is emotionally fragile. His narcissism is so extraordinary that even during the pandemic, all that he's interested in is himself. And I think what we've really seen is that the Trump without the enablers, without his staff, without the power of being president, is really in a very fragile position. Probably you're familiar, his niece, Mary Trump, a trained psychologist, says that he's really very, very fragile, and in a way that makes him more dangerous. To me, the big mystery is why so many people fall for his glibness, for his showmanship. And perhaps that really tells you something very negative about the world we live in, and that is perhaps that the message has got lost and everything now is like a reality show. You've got to have excitement every 5 minutes. But I think clearly Trump stands naked before the world, before his own people. And I think it'll be a wake-up call for many in America.
Now, Trump is not a career politician, so very much having gone against the grain and being elected as the Republican candidate a few years ago. Now, what lessons will the Republicans have learned from this?
You know, I'm afraid political parties very rarely learn lessons. The party, as we know, is totally divided. What Trump did, and it's quite remarkable, is whereas the Republican Party was, let's say, a party of policies and principles, old-style conservatism, limited government, no deficits, America as an activist power. Trump converted the party into the party of personality. The Republican Party became the party of Trump. And I think this was very dramatically indicated. You will recall when there was the Republican National Convention, which obviously re-chose Trump as its presidential candidate. They ditched decades and decades of policies, and that is that there is no platform. Normally, every political party has a platform. In this country, obviously, the ANC, when it runs for an election, has a platform on land reform, on justice, on health. In the Republican Party, they ditched their normal program and basically said the program of the Republican Party is Donald Trump. Now, with Donald Trump out of the way, the important thing to remember is that the forces which created him, the social conflicts, the massive inequality. We need to remember America is unique among developed countries. It is the most unequal economically, and it is the most deeply divided. So those factors will continue. And what we're clearly going to see is a battle for the heart and mind of the Republican Party between old-style Republicans, George W. Bush, Ronald Reagan, who had certain principles, and the new Trumpites, Ivana Trump, Ted Cruz, who are basically playing the populist game, rousing divisions. So essentially, we'll see a debate along two lines. Should politics return to an elite game in which the masses do not really participate? And of course, what Trump did is to bring in the masses. And will the Republican Party regain its soul and become a party of limited government, the rule of law, and of course, a respect for one's opponents and differing points of view?
So apart from egg on the faces of the Republicans, are there any other real substantive losses? Would you say they've lost support?
You know, it's an extraordinary thing that we live in a world which defies logic. It defies facts. Trump invented or popularized the idea of fake news. And what it really means is that if people do not share a common framework, a common sense of facts, then in fact we don't have politics, we have war and conflict. I saw recent figures that 88% of Republicans believe that the elections were somehow fraudulent. The facts are that it was the cleanest election in modern days, as confirmed by the Attorney General, by the government's own Homeland Security, by the press, by the courts. It was a clean and honest election. Maybe one or two dead people voted, but it would make no difference. Instead, 88% of the American people believe, or the Republican Party believe, that it was robbed, that Trump was robbed. And even now, opinion surveys today show that 44% of Republicans are sympathetic to the uprising, rebellion, whatever you want to call the takeover of the congressional Capitol Hill. So we have, on the one hand, people who like to think they look at the facts, they look at realities. On the other hand, perhaps 40% of Trump's supporters who believe Trump irrespective of what the facts indicate. So for the 40% who will support Trump thick or thin, I think they will learn nothing. And they are probably at the moment unreachable in terms of any kind of reasonable argument. But perhaps even if 30 or 40% of the Republican Party moves away from Trump, we could perhaps see some beginning of an intelligent dialogue. Another possibility might well be, as we've seen in the ANC in South Africa, that the GOP will split and that it'll be divided between, we might call the Bush-Reagans, people like Romney, like Sass, like Jeff Flake, Hogan, the governor of Maryland, people that we would say live in the world that we live in and accept facts. And then the Ted Cruzes and the Hawleys and the people who are essentially populists, who are unscrupulous and have no respect for facts and reality. And we might see a split along those lines.
So has Donald Trump lost all political capital?
I don't think Trump has lost all political capital. Remember that, first of all, he has an iron grip for the moment on maybe 30% of Republicans who will follow him through thick and thin. Remember, he's also a master showman. He's a master at social media, at manipulating opinion. And as importantly, very dishonestly, but effectively, Trump was able to raise more than $200 million, ostensibly to fight the corrupt, robbed, stolen election. But in reality, as we now know, maybe 5–10% has gone on that. The other 90% of the $200 million, $180 million, is now in the kitty for Trump's political comeback or political role. So he has money, he has a loyal group of supporters, and he's a master at manipulation. So I wouldn't count him out as a factor, but I do think that he will not be the decisive power behind the throne of the Republicans that he probably would have been had this invasion of the Capitol not taken place.
Professor Schrire, thank you so much for that discussion, giving us insights onto the state of affairs in the US following that pandemonium orchestrated by Donald Trump.